But we know that SPLC is the narrative center of the DNC, of the modern progressive movement in the United States. How deep does the rabbit hole go? Well, it goes all the way into schools. And Dan Lennington from Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty joins me on the program. This is an organization that has been for decades now, an organization that has promoted slander, that has promoted defamation, that has crafted its own narratives. Now we know they pay to do it, but they also are what the schools rely on when it comes to lessons on racism or discrimination.
Yes, the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction actually has over 250 references to SPLC materials on their website. These are teacher training materials, resources for students, issues related to racism and so-called equity, kindergarten through second grade lessons on, quote, teaching tolerance, all sorts of things for teachers. There's hundreds of resources from them on their website today. Also, UW Whitewater, other organizations in Wisconsin also tout the SPLC materials. And as you said, this entire program, this entire entity is a fraudulent sham. They were raising money, millions and millions of dollars, raising money in order to fight hatred, fight extremist groups. They famously every year put up a map of the United States and label certain groups as extremist or racist, and they would raise money off of this. And it turns out a lot of their money, big chunk, at least $3 million, was being paid to the Klu Klux Klan. It sounds absolutely ridiculous. Paid to the Ku Klux Klan, National Alliance, the Imperial Wizard of the United Klans of America received money. That particular group was the one that claimed responsibility for bombing the 16th Street Baptist Church in 1963, killing 4 girls. The Aryan Nation, the Sadistic Souls Motorcycle Club, the National Socialist Party of America, National President of the American Front. This money was, one of my favorite ones here is the Exalted Cyclops of the Ku Klux Klan received money. The indictment alleges that the money raised to, quote, fight extremism from SPLC was deposited into fictitious companies that were created by SPLC to hide the nature and origin of this money. And then this money was paid out to what SPLC called were field sources, which were these people like members of the Ku Klux Klan, who were then going out and organizing extremist rallies. One of them, just so people have this picture in their mind, one of them was the famous Charlottesville Unite the Right protest with the tiki torches and the quote, white supremacists and the "You will not replace us" chants. The Unite the Right event was organized in part by money paid, at least $270,000 paid by SPLC to what they call a secret informant F-37, who was one of the guys who organized, created, encouraged people, was involved in paying for transportation to get these what appear to be some sort of actors now in this entire protest. The protest that has just sort of lived rent-free in the minds of liberals for years because
it still does.
Trump made a comment out of, and they keep bringing it up, but it was paid for by the left. And so it demonstrates this whole, we used to call it astroturfing. It's something much more devious now. It's a criminal behavior. It's money laundering and just lies created to raise money and then spend the money in fictitious ways.
Well, and spend the money in ways to foment chaos and to create a narrative that you can then use to make claims to violate people's civil liberties, because that's really what it is. And then to insinuate that same messaging into government bodies. And the Biden administration met with the SPLC 11 times. You were talking about F-37. He was in direct communication with the SPLC. University of Wisconsin Whitewater, K-12 public schools in Wisconsin, across the United States using SPLC materials. They are generated for the purpose of convincing people of one narrative that is not true. See, that's the thing. If it were just one side of a debate or it was presented in a neutral way, it's not. It's presenting the incontrovertible narrative, according to the SPLC, that America is a systemic racist place. And the only way that we can undo that is essentially by discriminating against white people, by breaking down the rule of law, by busting capitalism, by stopping the enforcement of immigration laws, et cetera. It's political, and it needs to be ripped out by the guts from the government institutions that are using it, but I don't know how to do that, Dan.
Well, this indictment is a great start. I used to prosecute cases like this. This is a charge of conspiracy. So if people call you a conspiracy theorist, Vicki, this is literally a conspiracy charged by the federal government that allegedly happened and will be likely proven at trial. That this SPLC and other individuals agreed to violate the law through money laundering, wire fraud, and other actions, giving false statements to banks. They lied to banks. They were caught by auditors. After they were caught by auditors, they created an entirely different system involving purchasing of gift cards to people. They created this thing called Rare Books Warehouse, where there would be money come in and go out to purported employees, but the purported employees were these field sources who were designed to go out and foment white supremacist stories out in the world. And so, we see these things happen. We've like this. Was it called the United Front, or this group that would come out in Washington D.C. and all these men would have face masks on. They would have blue polo shirts and brown khakis, and the clothes they were wearing looked like they just came out of a store, and the tags were just clipped off. They had creases on them. The flags had creases on them, like they just came out like somebody purchased all these things from Kohl's or Amazon or something, and they just took them out of a bag. The guys would show up in U-Haul vans, go out, do their little white supremacist parade, and then get back in the U-Haul vans and then driven away somewhere and released, and nobody could ever figure out who these guys were or where they came from. But there was all sorts of things like that have happened over the last 10 years, and this just makes you wonder, what else? And besides the SPLC, what other entities are out there raising money to combat white extremism, and yet are creating the narrative that the white extremism or white supremacy still exists?
I think
it kind of turns us all into a supremacist.
Well, we have this one indictment. I think this is what they could prove. I think the rabbit hole goes pretty deep. You can actually pinpoint the moment SPLC identifies a person or a group as a hate group, all of a sudden they show up everywhere. So I'll give you an example. The Blood Tribe in Watertown at the Watertown Pride, sexualizing kids thing. SPLC had identified them, and then they start showing up in South Dakota, Tennessee, and in Wisconsin. That doesn't make sense, does it? Nick Fuentes was a nobody. All of a sudden, the SPLC puts him on a hate list. Next thing you know, he's getting profiles in the New York Times, and he's got a podcast. And suddenly, from a nobody to someone we have to pay attention to, and he's on the hate map. So I think if you actually did a deeper dive into this, if it's even possible, and I don't think we have the resources to do it, I bet you find an awful lot of astroturfing and narrative manipulation in classic Saul Alinsky rules for radical style. I can't prove it right now, but be suspect. All the hate hoaxes that were out there that the SPLC promoted, including one in Madison, Wisconsin. You've got to wonder if this isn't something that's either just so, it's part of a well-oiled machine, or they are the functionaries driving it in the first place.
Yeah, the way to prove these, and I think this indictment really shows the way forward on how to prove these sort of things, is through grand juries and criminal investigations and subpoenas. Because what the prosecutors did in this case is that they got bank subpoenas, and they got all the bank records from all these entities and kept getting more subpoenas and more bank records to create a tree. And I've done this before in cases that I've tried before, which involve seeing these entities that are created by different suspicious groups, and then going and getting the articles of incorporation and the bank records for those, and it just goes through a series of creating just this network of fraud that you can put up on a whiteboard or on a PowerPoint slide and show to a jury. They created this group, and then this group got money from that group, and then this money eventually went to buy a pallet of bricks in Minneapolis, Minnesota during the George Floyd riots. I mean, that's the type. That's how you would show. You know, we always had suspicion about the George Floyd riots, and we used to talk about, well, where do these pallets of bricks show up from? All of a sudden, everything was fine, and then this extreme violence took over, and there were people who appeared to be fomenting the violence, and like, where did they come from? And, you know, we would be called conspiracy theorists and say, like, well, you know, can't have any proof of this. But the way to prove this, I mean, citizens are not going to be able to prove this. Journalists are not going to be able to prove this. It's going to have to be what the FBI has done here in the U.S. Attorney's Office, is to basically get the records and then start interviewing the people who signed bank records and giving them immunity and say, look, if you tell us the whole story, we won't charge you criminally, which is probably what's happened with a number of these people who have formed the basis of this indictment, is that they've been given immunity in exchange for telling the story. And so you have to build your case that way with bank records that are, you know, confidential. You and I don't have access to them. And so the criminal indictment is really the way to prove this. And you know, finally, we have a Department of Justice willing to investigate and look out for this fraud.
Hopefully more, not just this one and be one and done. In the meantime, just based on SPLC, the state legislature should begin ripping out every element of the SPLC from any government, whether it's Department of Justice, DPI, Department of Revenue. I don't care where it is, University of Wisconsin system. Get rid of it, because otherwise you're essentially allowing the scam and the sham to continue. And it is at great detriment to our society and justice. Dan Lennington, I appreciate the time on the program today. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.